I'm in between places right now. I got to be off like 1 something ish, and my guest fell through, so it's just lame me. Sorry to disappoint. I know what a disappointment I am in your eyes. The shame is so hard to bear. It's hard for me to even continue to go on living this way. Just brand me with a scarlet letter, a big D for dork. Hey, Poindexter. There's nothing really going on in the loop. Just continuing to exist as I do. Hopefully not fuck anything up too badly in the meantime between now and death. Terminator. Nice. Nicholas 1989. Kudos on the first question of the day. Absolutely. I was having a discussion about this recently with someone. Unfortunately, I can't remember the exact quote. It was a very cool quote. But he was saying that, like, it's true. Like, I think Christian societies like the U.S. somehow imagine that irreligious societies that don't have some dominant religion, are some like wild heathen, like where everybody is like killing each other and stealing and raping, and I think some like truly religious people imagine that that's what the world is like in countries that don't have like religion to keep them from doing bad things. And essentially that's Japan. Japan does not people don't like not kill or not steal because they're afraid of hell. They're afraid of being caught by the police, obviously, and they're afraid of public humiliation. That their family, friends, people around them will look at them in a bad way. And so far more so, I think, than in the U.S., the Japanese are very sensitive to the opinions of others around them, and would be less likely to do something illegal for that reason. It's not everybody. Obviously not. There's criminal elements in society in general, but I always used to, when I was teaching, I used to ask Japanese people as a question, like, hey, you ever steal anything? And they'd be shocked at even the concept of the question, like, no, of course not. And then I'd usually say, so where'd you get that pen? And like half of the time it was like from their office. I was like, gotcha. And they would give it like a little laugh. But it's like, the concept of doing something illegal for many people is so beyond them. It's also like, I was just talking about this last night actually with another friend, there's so little graffiti in Tokyo. There's very, very, very little graffiti. And what graffiti there is often removed quite quickly. But I think it's just because younger kids here just are less inclined to do illegal shit. Whereas, like, I think for young North Americans, it's almost a rite of passage to do something illegal at some point. I'm not sure though. I'm not entirely sure. Like, I can't give any numbers. I haven't done any polls on this, but generally speaking, I think Japanese people are, as Norfolk says, preserving the law, or just trying to prevent themselves from being dishonored. And I talked about this online here once before, but it's definitely true, I think. Like, the Japanese win few gold medals at the Olympics, very few. But you will never hear about a Japanese athlete getting caught using performance-enhancing drugs. It will never happen. But like a Chinese or American or German or French athlete, oh hell yeah! I mean, they have no compunction about using performance-enhancing drugs, because if you get caught, basically nobody in our countries really cares. I mean, like, of course, like in the media, people say, "Oh, that's terrible. You know, you shouldn't do that." But nobody's like going to stop being your friend. You know, like, or like really shun you. But like in Japanese society, if you were publicly found to have cheated in like a sport event, like the Olympics or something like that, you would be so shunned by those around you. Like, you would be like some families would disown you, you know. So I don't know. Kuta, is it hard to get a job in Japan? It is impossible if you cannot legally get a visa. And the necessary requirements for getting a visa are clearly spelled out by the Ministry of Justice. So I recommend researching that and finding out what those requirements are before talking about getting a job. You need to get a visa. If you have a visa and the proper requirements, getting a job is as easy as the economy allows in any place. Right now, I've heard from people that it's not as easy as it was to get a teaching job. That the recession has hit the Eikawas pretty hard, and the number of jobs are fewer. But people are still getting hired, so it's not totally impossible. In other jobs, like it's so individual that like I'm not a human resources counselor. I have no idea, depending on what other types of jobs. But I would point out once again, you cannot get a visa for doing anything but specialized professional work, of which the most common one is teaching. So you can't get a visa to like work at Denny's. So that's basically the deal. Yes, Marcin RKL. Like money goes further in China or Thailand or places like that. The problem is if you live and work in that country, you are paid in the money of that country. So visiting from a country where your salary is relatively higher is awesome. But working and living in that country, you'll be getting paid money that's far less valuable. So when you transfer it back to, like, say, US dollars, it's worth very little. It's one of the many reasons why I chose to work and live in Japan rather than China. I actually was much more interested in China before I moved. I spoke some Chinese. I was very interested in China, but for me it was just quality of life issues and exchange rate issues. Like living and working in China, unless you're working in business, like you're not going to make a lot of money. But in Japan, you can make enough money to travel fairly easily around Southeast Asia. Well, Chinese, all kanji originates from China, and they're similar in Japan, but it's kind of like if you are Spanish and looking at Italian, you can recognize a lot of the words, but it's different. It's totally different. Like the sounds are different. But often the meaning of the word. It's like if you see, like for example, banyo. Like as an English-speaking person, maybe I could kind of guess that says bathroom or Guten Morgen in German. like Guten Morgen in German. Yeah, I can basically see that. Sometimes they're similar, but they're completely different. I was not raised in China. What? Where did that come from? Before I moved to Asia, I was curious about China. I studied Chinese in university, so I thought about living there. But after doing some research, I decided Japan, for financial reasons, would be much easier. Originally I was planning on being Shanghai Cooney. But I never, well, this is way before, this is 10 years ago. We're talking about, we're a decade ago. It was before YouTube existed. But for me it was basically, and I think these reasons should be obvious, but quality of like life, meaning like air pollution, food safety, freedom of religion, the ability to actually practice. I'm a Catholic, practicing Catholic, to like go to a legitimate Catholic church freely, rather than like a state-sanctioned Catholic church in China. Also, I've been researching online. I read many posts, mostly from a website called Dave's ESL Cafe. Was a website I got most of my information from. Actually, almost 90% of my information from. And that website had a few too many horror stories about Chinese people cheating teachers out of their money, and the Chinese government basically saying, too fucking bad, next time be from China. And I heard a few stories like that about Japan, but like in terms of number, like the on that website forum, according to that website, it seemed like a 50-50 chance of you getting paid according to your contract in China. And in Japan, it seemed like it was possible there was some fly-by-night companies, but essentially it would be rare that you would get totally fucked over by a company. But although it was possible. So for me at the time, it just seemed a bit more like that. Japan seemed the safer of the two options. Literally, I took the safer option. The less like adventuresome route in my mind. Hello, Tokyo Love. I am in my most boring of places, the Ebisu Tully's Coffee here in Tokyo. Where might a Roman Catholic go for service in Tokyo? There's not many Christians. I personally go to a church in Akabane, which is hilarious because there's like two masses. There's like a Sunday morning like 7 a.m. mass, and there's no way in hell I'm going to that unless I'm still drunk from the night before, and I need to get some like really quick forgiveness in before like before the next day even begins. It's like something horrible the previous evening. Very possible. I'm by no means a good person. I'm just been raised Catholic, and I still go to church every day. But the 5 o'clock, there's a 5 p.m. mass on Sunday, which is all Filipinos. It's like 90% Filipinos, and the priest is actually a Filipino who does the mass in Japanese, but he doesn't actually speak Japanese, so he just reads it phonetically off of like cue cards. And like the difference between the two masses is so huge. Like Japanese people sing at church in a very half-hearted manner. It's very, very like it's bimyo. But the Filipino mass, oh my god, it reminds me completely of the mostly Latino services I went to when I lived in LA County. When I lived in Los Angeles, I used to go to church services in like an 80% Latino neighborhood. And there was fucking tambourines and people on guitar, and like it's the same here. It's like seriously, the Filipinos are the Mexicans of Asia. Absolutely. Like the Filipino church services in Tokyo, it's like they've got their like their banjos and guitars and they're banging tambourines and they're singing in Tagalog. It's hilarious. It's like it's like almost the point where it's like it's really cute. It's like really charming. Like they just look so fun. And then like they have to like the non-singing part. They're all so bored. They're all so incredibly bored. And actually, the other really funny part. Actually, I should do a vlog on it. I just feel a little bit weird about filming during services. But outside the church, like little Filipino old ladies set up blankets and sell Filipino homemade foods and like candles with the Virgin Mary on it, and like all this other like, you know, like bizarre stuff in front of like the church as the people are coming out, and about a third to a quarter of the women coming out of the Sunday night services are dressed as though they're going to work at a Hostess bar that night, which is kind of hilarious. Like, which probably, I mean, realistically, that's one of the demographics for Filipinos. It's nursing, being a housewife, or a hostess or a student. You know, those are the four main categories, I'd say. But it's just very interesting to see that whole world. It's a whole subculture. Hey, sorry about the lag. Not much I can do about it. So, it's interesting though. But there's also like there's a white church, like it's all white, basically down in Roppongi. It's run by the Franciscans. And in Yotsuya there's one. I've been to other churches, like Catholic churches in Suidobashi, that were like just 100% Japanese. But I kind of like the Filipino one in Akabane the most. It's the most entertaining. They don't really care. I don't notice. I don't know. I guess they look and think, oh wow, that guy's talking to a computer, but it's really not that big an issue. It's not like I'm like severing the head of a small chicken or anything. I mean, it's within the realm of normal societal function. It's not that bizarre. I mean, people are aware of internet communication technology. It's not like I'm in like 1880s Japan and they think like, you know, my devil box is possessed by evil spirits. I think people pretty much get the idea that I'm web conferencing with somebody. It's not that bizarre a concept in modern society anymore. Like when I'm vlogging in the streets, they just think, oh, tourist, you know. So I don't think it's really an issue. I think it's if they just think I'm a tourist, or they think I'm, you know, web conferencing with somebody back home. I'm on battery right now, but actually, good point. I should plug in. The reason I'm actually at this very seat in this very shop, it's one of the few places where I have both an extremely good Wi-Fi connection and access to an electrical outlet where the staff don't come by and get pissy at me after like they spot me stealing their electricity. That's the biggest thing for me right now is finding places where they don't care if I use electricity and they have a good Wi-Fi signal. Epan 86. I have no particular opinion about the Kansai dialect. Although generally speaking, I dislike Kansai comedians, largely because I have a contrarian personality, and Kansai comedians are supposed to be the funniest. I think the majority of the Kansai comedians are just following this Yoshimoto Kogyo kind of color by numbers comedy style. it's like insert like slap on headgear, and so I don't really get it. And for me as an outside observer, like I will never speak the language well enough to have a real understanding of like intrinsically the difference between different nuances in dialect or accent. I mean, it's all Japanese to me. I mean, that's something only native speakers, I think, ever really fully understand. Nicholas 1989, upgrading my MacBook is one of many things I do not have money for. I mean, before that, I need to buy a new camera for my YouTube vlogs. Late blossom, not accidentally necessarily. I wouldn't say it's like something that you're like tripping. But I regularly, sometimes I'd say about half of my life now. Like yesterday, I was thinking, speaking in Japanese 80% of my conscious day, because like when I speak in Japanese now, my Japanese is not perfect by any means. I'm not fluent, but I don't translate when I speak mentally. I speak directly from thought to like out of my mouth. And so when you're in like, I was in like a 6-7 hour long meeting yesterday in all Japanese, like at some point, like you completely forget English in any way, shape, or form. You're just in the moment of the Japanese thing. And it doesn't mean my Japanese is great. It doesn't mean my Japanese is great. It just means there's no step between translation from English to Japanese. It's because of frequency and exposure to the language, frequency of use, exposure to the language. But still my grammar and vocabulary are shitty. Those are things you actually have to practice, like actively, like studying to increase your vocabulary, and having someone correct you when you say something wrong. But it's and for me, like my process of learning Japanese involved a lot of alcohol. For the first 3-4 years, was out at a bar almost every night drinking and chit-chatting with local people. And I think something about the process, something about the space in between being sober and drunk, there's a place where your brain can begin to operate differently. And so I think that was one of the situations to which I was able to kind of get over the translating thing. Like where I stopped translating and started speaking directly from Japanese, I think in the bar hopping process. That social environment is what brought it out. Because things started coming out naturally more than like thoughtfully. Like instead of like thoughtfully thinking, oh, I want to say this, I would just say what I was able to say naturally from the like kind of bucket of language I had. I would pull whatever was available rather than think of a sentence in English first and then say, how do I translate this into Japanese? I would just have like this repertoire of comments I could make and pull those directly out, given by reacting to the situation. But I think alcohol was a key factor in the developmental process of that skill. But it also means like I have a lot of ingrained, very sloppy mannerisms in Japanese that are really hard for me to change. Because I talk like I learned my English, I learned my Japanese in a bar. Essentially. My accent is horrible. Like if I call a hotel to make a reservation, like 3 words into like my Japanese reservation, they switch to English, and it's like it's on the phone, you can't see me. Come on, I tried. But they absolutely know from my accent immediately that I'm a gaijin. Why do the Japanese say the N-word? Nicholas, I'm not familiar with them saying it, but you have to understand curses, like English language curse words for Japanese people hold no taboo value. It's just a word. So they have no concept of why that word is bad. So for them, like, you know, it's just a sound. So they have no connection or understanding to the cultural background or social meaning of a certain word. So like, yeah, so they have no understanding of it. Nicholas 1989, she absolutely was not saying that. I think you know that. You're either making a joke or incredibly obtuse. Lake Blossom. Actually, this is a myth. Japanese doesn't have curse words, essentially. Japanese absolutely, really does have words you absolutely cannot say. But, like, they are so bad. They are so bad that, like, no matter what the context, even with friends, even with very, very close friends, you really can't use them. It's weird. But they do have their words that are definitely you're not allowed to say. Like, for example, chon is basically the N-word for Koreans. It's the equivalent, almost exactly, the Japanese word for Koreans. But it's not in any dictionary. You will never find it in a dictionary. But it exists. And there's many other words like it, like for different things. But Japanese friends, no matter how good a friend they are, or even how honest they think they're being, cannot bring themselves to actually teach foreigners the words, those most untouchable of words, because they're so beyond, they're so taboo to them. Yeah, then how do you learn them? Yeah, exactly. I only found out about them after reading original Japanese texts or overhearing Japanese people talking to each other, and then asking someone, what does this word mean? And them freaking out, like, oh my god, no, we don't say that. And I'm like, no, I actually heard 2 guys on the train say that, you know. And they're like, oh, but like the words, they don't even appear in Japanese dictionaries. But they've been around for like, you know, 100 years or more. But nobody talks about it. Well, like, I mean, for example, like the word I just mentioned was, you know, it's the N-word equivalent for Koreans. So often it's racial. It's a racial term. Words for handicapped people. Also, there's a class of untouchables in Japanese society, which essentially many people who have lived here for many years are not even aware it exists, because nobody ever discusses it. But there is a lowest class of untouchables, kind of like India has, that they just don't discuss. And so even the word itself, like, people are very uncomfortable if you even use the word, and the word doesn't appear in the dictionary, although it exists. It absolutely exists. You know, so it's like there are, but they're not. Noshok, yeah, they basically dealt with dead bodies, butchers, leather makers, things like that. But the thing is, things that are taboo in Japan are actually taboo. Like in the West, things that are taboo are not really taboo because somebody's got to break that taboo. Like all of Western modern society is based on finding a way to break. Is there any remaining taboo? What? It's I remember an art exhibit in New York City once. There was a big controversy over it called Piss Christ, and the art exhibit was basically a bottle of urine with a crucifix in the bottle, and people were debating: is it art? Is it freedom of expression? Should it be allowed to be displayed in a public gallery? And there's all this big thing about it, but it's just sort of art had gotten to the point where it was just what's the most offensive thing we can possibly do at this point to human emotion to get a response from people. That's the level art is at in the West, and Japanese art, maybe some arts are that way, but they don't break taboos the way we break taboos. You know, it's not comparable at all. Taboos are still taboos here, basically. Nudity, right? And it's weird. Nudity. People here are so fine with nudity. I mean, I see naked people all the time. I once or twice a month, I go to a public bath and shower with 5 to 10 other naked Japanese dudes. People are fine about it. At a cherry blossom party, if someone got naked, they would be like, he's drunk, it's a cherry blossom party, that happens. But, in other situations, no. I don't know. It's, they don't have as many sexual taboos as I think we have in the West. Noshok, I think you're right. I think the Japanese are less prudish compared to Americans. How do the Japanese react to homeless people? They don't. They don't react to anything, which is the same as me on the laptop. People don't react to things. The entire society is based on this amazing skill to ignore what is going on directly next to you. Largely, people say in Tokyo, because it's so crowded, you can't survive in such a crowded city unless you just block out so much of what's around you. So we just ignore the homeless. And the homeless don't ask for money. They don't harass people. There's literally 2 homeless guys I know of. Literally 2, and I know exactly the 2. One's usually in Shibuya near Hachiko. The other guy, I've seen him in a couple places, but they ask for money from gaijin. They don't ask Japanese people, but those 2 homeless guys. But the 99.99% of homeless people in Japan would never ever ask for money from anybody or interact with people in any way, shape, or form. They just keep their distance completely. And actually, it's to the point where if you try to give a homeless person money, they might even refuse it. I know one friend who says he'll if he sees a homeless guy, he always pretends to find change in a vending machine and then share some of it with the homeless guy, so the homeless guy doesn't feel bad. I don't know, but it's completely different from the West as far as the homeless. And but there's this one guy in he lives essentially on Sentai in Shibuya, and he's usually shirtless. His pants are in tatters. He's got this huge Rastafarian fro, and he just stands on the street and he just looks for gaijin, and he just goes up to gaijin because he knows gaijin will pay. Gaijin, oh, a homeless person, yes, oh, I'm so sorry for you, and give him money. But Japanese people would just be like, no, fuck off. Are you crazy? Obviously, he's crazy. You know, it's literally like the only one. He somehow figured out that if you ask gaijin, they'll give you money, and like that gaijin are used to it, and he has no shame. So yeah, and he might be brilliant. Like in another way, he's like living large probably compared to every other homeless people. Every other homeless person is up at like 4 o'clock in the morning collecting tin cans and cardboard to sell for recycling money to survive in their little tent in the park. But that guy is drinking 40s and eating BK burgers probably. Yeah, I did see one guy, I think, once or twice that I thought were homeless and gaijin. It is possible to become a homeless gaijin. It's very possible to become like a Brazilian homeless gaijin. You know, especially recently. Like, there's been lots of layoffs in the auto industry. So a huge number of factory workers, South American factory workers, are now unemployed, and there's absolutely no other jobs for them. If you're like a Westerner and you came here like on a teaching visa, there's usually another job. You'll find a job somehow. But for factory workers, if those jobs get cut and they don't have language skills even, there's literally nothing else they can do. So they have a danger to become homeless. Whereas, like, if you, and this is why they don't let people in except for professionals, because if you lose your job as a professional, somehow you can find another job. But if you have no professional qualifications or skills, the likelihood of you being able to retrain easily is nil. So that's why the rules are so strict. So, Nicholas, 1989, you have to be a native speaker of the language you are teaching and have graduated from a 4-year university in any degree course. You can study anything, but you have to be native level. It's a basic requirement. But that being said, like, I've met Puerto Ricans whose English was horrible, like, but they were born in the United States of America, so paperwork-wise, they are. Also, I have seen people who are, like, for example, German, and like married to a Japanese person, and they were white, and their English was very good, and they just didn't tell people they were German. You know, or they were like people from Holland, other Europeans, very good English skills. But the thing is, they can't get a visa for teaching the language. If they have a visa through some other means, then they can teach. You can do whatever the hell you want. You can, you know, open a fucking supermarket and sell apples if you have a visa to do so. But if you want to get a visa for teaching, you have to be a native speaker. No, and now they're also painting the house next door. So it's noisy as hell, and they've got like all these tarpaulin and stuff. But I'm thinking now, while they're painting the house, is a good time to try and just get rid of all the bottles, because maybe the whoever put them there will blame it on the construction crew. So I'm thinking about just doing it like the day the construction crew is wrapping up. It's that, or just slowly. I've been taking one at a time and using them to water my plants in front of my house. So the number has been slowly decreasing. But still, there's still quite a few. Tully's, I don't know. Some Mr. Donut does free refills. Tully's, I think, doesn't do free refills. Exactly, yeah. Like on a working holiday visa, you can also teach English. But you're competing for jobs against people who have a degree. And basically, if they have a candidate who has a degree and a candidate who doesn't have a degree, it's an easy decision. They take the guy with the degree. So it's only if they have no other job applicant available, or in the case that you're a woman. Like there's much fewer women, so women often, if they have no qualifications, can get a teaching job because schools want to have like a 50-50 number of women and male teachers, but it's probably more like 80-20 in terms of the number of gaijin teaching English. Like women are fewer and further between, so they get a little bit more leniency from the companies. They do not get any leniency from the government for the visa. Sardo, I have actually, which is shocking. If you go huge tracks along, what's not to like about her?
Oh, but father, I want the girl that I marry to have a special something.
No singing! Sorry. I'll stop. Somebody quoted from something and it put me mentally somewhere else. Any other questions, by the way? Will you have a hard time in Tokyo being an American or accepting? No, absolutely not. There's being American, if anything, is one of the easier things to be in Japan, other than Japanese, if not the easiest. Yes, Jason B2. I did say that about the spinach, or more likely a piece of nori seaweed. Does the over formality ever go away? Yes. And no. Like it's contextual. Like an older husband and wife refer to each other in the most informal, actually rude terms, like "oh my." But contextually, if you're meeting someone for the first time, you have to use the most polite formality. So it's context. The relationship does affect. Like if you've known the person for years, they're more likely to tell you. But like in an office context, like people are not going to tell you you've got a piece of nori in your teeth. Not working on any new projects quite yet that I can really talk about anything really. And the game show, Japanese game show I did last year, I didn't do this season, basically because I tried to bluff them into paying me more, and I lost, and so I got no job. Why do people from Nigeria all seem to work at clubs trying to get you to come in? Because that's essentially the only job available to them. It's not the only job, obviously. There's Nigerian bankers, there's Nigerian financial analysts. There's Nigerian diplomats. There's Nigerian, everything. But the wide majority of them living here don't have those jobs. They're working in the bar industry because they don't have access to other jobs legally, for legal reasons. It's like why do Filipinos all open why do Koreans all open laundry shops? Why do Chinese always open restaurants? Why do it's like 90% of a certain ethnic group somehow seems to gravitate towards one business model, and it's like they get their foot in the door in this one business model, and then that's it for them in that country. That's the job that nationality does forever then. But of course, some small percentage of them do break out into other fields. But in immigrant cultures around the world, largely there's an economy, an immigrant economy to itself, that supports these people through connections and things like that. It's the same as anywhere. What's your favorite food, Japanese food outside of ramen? It's a tough one. I think I would go with outside of ramen. Well, really soba. Soba is number one. Ramen's maybe number two. Number three, I'm gonna go with tonkatsu. Can be good. Eel, and the thing is, I like eel a lot, but I don't really have the urge to eat it that often. It's like a once every couple months thing. It's just delicious, but it's definitely not like something I crave so often. Instead of getting a visa, can't you apply for permanent residency? You really can't apply for permanent residency right off the bat unless you have exceptional circumstances, you were on a Japanese boat that got lost at sea, and you were born to Japanese parents who were lost at sea, and then you came back, and then you could say you want to become a permanent resident. Maybe they give it to you, but you have to have a visa for a number, at least 10 years, to even apply for a permanent residency. 10 years is the cutoff point for a continual visa. And you have to so continuously living in the country for 10 years, which means if you leave once and live somewhere else and then come back again, you have to start from zero again. So I turned 8 years old July 14th. I'm just now 8 years in Japan. So when this visa ends in 2 years' time, that will be so this visa will end next summer. I have one more year on my current visa, so that will be 9 years. So I have to reapply for a visa extension, and that will either be a 1 year or a 3 year extension. So that'll bring me to 10 or 12 years. And at that point, then I can apply for permanent residency. Yeah, sort of, absolutely. 8 years? Holy shit. This is a bizarre way to put it. It's not just about living in Japan for 8 years. It's just age, and this is something anyone could say ever. But I remember distinctly when I was 13 or 14, getting a hold of my brother's Playboy magazine, and thinking, wow, someday I'm going to be older like the girls in Playboy magazine. And I distinctly remember looking at say a kiosk recently, and there's a magazine with a beautiful young girl on it, and oh my god, wow, I used to be that young. But I don't ever remember the point when I was the same age as young people, that age. I don't ever remember being that age. I remember being too young, and now I always feel like I'm too old. Somehow I missed that blur like of youth. I know I had it. I remember it to some extent, but like yeah, I'm gonna be 32 in September. Yeah, so it's weird. Time goes fast. Time goes extraordinarily fast. Suddenly, I'm the oldest person in the room, generally speaking, when I go out with people. You know. And Marcin RKL20 to her, you know. It's funny. The time goes fast. Yeah, it's something like 5,000 yen to renew your visa, something like that. And then you also, if you plan on leaving the country, have to buy a re-entry permit, which is like another 3,000 or 4,000 yen. So it'll set you back about 8,000 yen total for a new visa and a re-entry permit. All of this is going to be changing soon, I believe. They're in the midst of debating a huge overhaul of the foreigner registration system. Sardo, I am tired more, and I don't give a shit as much. And like when I was like 23 or 24, I would give a shit about stuff like my hair. Like for example, this mess right here, I'd try and do something with it. But as I get older, I care less and less. And I like that. It's a good trend. Grunt when bending over. I do make Japanese noises when I sit down. A lot of people who lived here a long time do this. But Japanese people, mostly old men, when they sit down, say "yusha, yusha" as they sit down. It's very contagious. I don't know why, but every time I sit down, "yusha." It's this weird sound you start making when you sit down. It's hilarious. And like other gaijin will call you on it. Other guys are like, "Did you just say yusha when you sat down?" What are you, like 80, dude? What are you, 80 years old? It's mostly older Japanese people do it. It's like it's the noise you make of exerting the energy of sitting down or standing up. Yeah, I don't do odo. I don't do odo. I do a lot of I do a lot of that. That's really hard to not do. It's just, you just pick it up from being around them. Even people who don't speak Japanese do it. It's funny. Yeah, I did just bow to the pizza guy, yeah. Well, no, it's not like it's like, it's a response, it's as you're listening to people, you just constantly go, do kana, like do kana. Thinking noises. There's a lot of thinking noises. Soka, so kane, do kana, do kane, do kana. And it's actually, and it's for English teachers, it's like they try and get like the most nama gaijin, like the freshest, right off the boat gaijin possible to teach English, because like gaijin like me, we've been here too long. Like we're horrible at teaching English, because I understand what they're trying to say in their broken, like, you know, English. Like I understand like pidgin Japanese English so well that they're just like, what? Color, place, time, and I'm like, oh yeah, I know what you mean, you know. But like, if you're really new, it's really hard to understand what the hell they're trying to say. And guys and gals who waited a long time start making all those Japanese filler noises, and so the Japanese person feels like they're not talking to a real foreigner. So it's actually most schools prefer people just off the boat. They're also cheaper, obviously. People with experience, you have to pay more, and it's not necessarily beneficial to the company that you're experienced. It's the most embarrassing cultural mistake I have made there. You know, it's funny. Like I read through the book that the guidebook. They had this whole section on Japanese etiquette, and none of it's fucking true. Like, I mean, yeah, it's true technically that yes, you're not supposed to do it, but like almost all of it is shit no one cares about. Like, there's for some reason in all those texts about like life in Japan, all these like warnings about how not to be rude to Japanese people. But the majority, like your chopstick stuff and how to use your oshibori. But like, if you actually do it the proper way, like 90% of Japanese people will call you and be like, "What are you doing? Like, why are you being so polite? Seriously, you can just do it like this. Don't worry about it." And they'll just like tell you to stop doing it, literally. Like, so if you had to eat with Japanese people and you like use the opposite side of your chopsticks to pick stuff up, like half the time they'll tell you to stop doing it. Because like nobody does that. I mean, if you're in like a very like formal situation, like you're meeting like your girlfriend's family for the first time, you better fucking do it. You absolutely need to know those etiquette rules. But like in the casual settings for a traveler, most often nobody expects you to adhere to the etiquette, except the public bathing. I didn't do it, but like if you ever got soap in the water, that is about the worst thing you could ever do. Like getting soap in the onsen water is, you should be shot for that. I've never done that. I'm not aware of anyone who's that stupid. Yeah, Marcin, yeah. Thank you and I'm sorry. Like, Japanese say thank you and I'm sorry, and it's different in meaning from when we say thank you and I'm sorry. Like, for them, it's like, I understand. I see. Maybe. It's a closer translation. So yeah, it's like the language is different from how they use it culturally. So often they overuse words. Like, for example, like, it was weird for me, like, sumimasen translates as I'm sorry, or, so it's like if you bump into someone, oh, sumimasen, but in a restaurant, if you want to call the attention of a waiter, you would also shout sumimasen. But it always seems strange, like, why am I apologizing that I want to buy a beer? Like, but it doesn't really exactly mean I'm sorry. You know. Also, similarly, like arigato, they say it about anything, you know, and like there's genuine, there's like, and this is true in any language. This is, I believe, any language. There's when people are actually really saying thank you actually for something specific, and then there's the just you say it because you have to say it situation. Like it's necessary in the context of like the interaction. Like, you know, how are you? Fine, thank you, and you. It's not, you know, it's not actually, they don't mean it. You have to say it given the context of the situation. But it's different in different languages, what words they use, and how they use it, and how frequently. Yeah, I've heard the legend of obrigado, meaning arigato. I don't know if it's true or not. I think it's an urban legend, but I would be surprised that the word thank you was a loan word from Portuguese. But like the Japanese didn't have the word for thank you before that, or they used a different one. I don't know. The difference between domo and arigato, there's no difference really. You use them together often, or use one only. Domo would be a little bit more casual, I guess, if you're walking out of a restaurant. The domo, it's a light thank you. But domo arigato, you can use them together. You can use just arigato. It's not such a big issue. Ever see them cooking house cats? No. Although just last night I had a conversation with a woman who told me in Okinawa she met a homeless person who said she ate street cats, and she didn't know if it was a joke or real. But Japanese people basically don't use sarcasm, so she's pretty sure it was real. But I think that was a very rare case. Weirdest thing I've ever eaten, for me, is raw pork. I don't eat raw pork. Was the mental barrier that was the hardest for me to overcome. I think more than a strange organism, it was the fact that it was raw. And there's a specific hitaru ika, I think it's called. It's a small kind of squid about this big. It's kind of pickled and purple, and you eat it whole and you bite it, it kind of explodes in your mouth and juice comes out. That's probably the most horrible thing I've ever eaten. I think that's called hotaru ika. It's usually served as a kind of little accompaniment for nihonshu, aka sake. Yeah. It's Psych 54. I don't know if it's that good. It's really nice. I like it a lot, But it's like let's think of the equivalent in the States, like turkey or something like that, where I like turkey, but I rarely eat it, And like good turkey, when it's really good, is like, it's awesome. It's really good. It's really nice to have a nice turkey meal. But I very rarely ever eat that. Oh yeah, my hair looks like shit today. Totally. Dako-chan, also known as the Black Sambo doll. They sell to yeah, Tick's wrong. They have a different national storyline than we have. Like, a Sambo doll is not culturally inappropriate here because they don't have anything. Yeah, open collar today. It's crazy. I'm wearing a linen shirt. This is summer Cooney. It's amazing. I was just like, fuck it today. But yeah, it's with there's, like, I have this one African American friend who randomly wrote on her Facebook post, she's like, oh, I went to this bar called Orange County, and I happened to know the bar, and I was like, oh my god, wow, you went to Orange County? It's a small bar in Echoda Station. I used to live near there, so I go drink it there every now and then. But like during the day, it's a toy shop, and at night, it's a bar. It's a really cool place. So basically, you're drinking inside a toy shop. The staff are all very young surfer dudes. But anyway, we just were talking like, oh yeah, it's a great bar, it's so cool. And then like the next email, she's like, and then there was the awkward moment when they brought out all of the little tin dancing Negro toys that they have, like these antique 1920s like tap dancing Negro toys to show her. And they're like, oh, look at this, we have this antique toy from like 1920s America. And she's like, oh, that's interesting. But the thing is, like, there's no national storyline about that. So it's just like some people who are very international would be aware that this is not something an African American person would be happy to see. Like, but they were not. They were just like, oh, I bet she's never seen this. Well, I wonder if she's ever seen any of this, like, antique thing. Like, it's unknown to them, And that's the issue so many times with quote unquote racism in Japan. These are issues that North Americans have about race that they bring with them when they come to Japan, and Japanese people are not aware of this, of this shit often, because this is all a North American racial issue, particularly when it revolves around issues of skin color. Issues of skin color are largely a North American, European thing. Issues of national origin is a Japanese thing. Like what country you're from, your national origin, that's important here in Japan. But your skin color, not so much. And that's hard for people who are raised in North America to understand. The very important but distinct difference between those two things. Like the guys at that shop that I just mentioned really liked her because she is from, I think, Maryland. She's American. And the name of their bar is Orange County, after, the part of America. If she had walked in and said she was from Ghana or Nigeria, their reaction would have been largely different to what it was that she's American. The fact that she's black is kind of irrelevant. The fact that she was born in Maryland, not Nigeria, is very relevant. Like the likelihood that one of them would date her, like one of the staff would be interested in dating her, is much higher if she's from the States than if she's from a place in Africa. Actually, Africa. It's national origin. It's basically first world, second world, third world status. Japan, since the Meiji period, Japan trounced Russia in the late 1800s in the Japanese-Russo War. From that point, about 80% of Japanese cherry trees were planted. To give you an idea of the importance in the national psyche of that event. The Russians were about to make Japan a colony, and Japan kicked Russia's ass. And Russia was humiliated by the Japanese. And it was the first time an Asian country had defeated a European power. And basically, Japan then said to all the other European countries, bring it. We are not the same as these other Asian countries. We are not colonized. We are colonizing other people. And so from the 1880s on, the Japanese have had a very strong self-image that they are separate from the rest of Asia in that they were never colonized by Europe. They are like Europeans in that they have the ability to colonize other places. So they have always thought of themselves as being a first world developed nation. Like that, Japan is somehow Eastern, Europe, in some way. And that Southeast Asia and China are backwards. Africa is backwards. All those other places are backwards, and it's up to Japan and the other European nations to look after these poor countries. And so they really enjoy giving out government aid to troubled nations, because that's their job as the mighty Japanese. They essentially believe that they are unique in that they're a first world nation, and financially, now that they're second richest nation in the world, they are number 2 in the world, essentially. So it's an issue of national background. So if you come from Cambodia, they don't maybe dislike you as a person, but there is a sort of class differentiation many people would be aware of. It's more of a class issue, international class issue, I would say, than a race issue. Are medical bracelets the same in Japan as they in North America? I have no idea. Never noticed. Healthcare here is awesome. I'm on their national health insurance plan. It's fantastic. Watching Americans debate public health insurance is comical. Like the national health insurance system here is fantastic and wonderful. But that being said, I've never had huge medical problems, so I don't know. You know, I've gone for my regular, like my dental and health is covered. You know. You can buy supplementary private healthcare if you want in Japan, but essentially every Japanese person is guaranteed national health coverage. No, I've not gotten swine flu yet, sadly. I want to. I just want the bragging rights. Lana Nelson, I don't know. Japan is actually in a far worse situation than the U.S. because of our age situation. It's now like, 1 in 3 people is over 60. So there's like 2 people for every retired person. That's very different from the U.S. The U.S. is still, retirees are a much smaller proportion. So soon it'll be like 1-to-1 ratio of retirees to working people in this country. So that in that way, Japan may not be able to afford it, and we've been slowly cutting back the amount they cover. So like the government doesn't cover 100% of everything. The government covers like 70% of my charges. So if I go to the doctor, the government takes care of 70%. 30% I have to pay out of pocket. But like that means I've had X-rays done. It's like $1,000. It's like $10 for an X-ray. If I go to the dentist and have a cavity done, it's like $12. Like the price of the actual care itself is so much lower compared to the U.S. Like dentists here make very little money compared to the U.S. Like doctors also are not. Doctors do not drive Lamborghinis here. Doctors, it's almost like a service industry. It's very difficult to become rich as a doctor in Japan, unless you're in cosmetic surgery or something like that. Those specific fields, but like actual like medical helping people doctors don't make money, but they are considered sensei, which is like a socially elite thing. But like basically, it used to be though that like for my age group, it was like 80%, but now it's like 70%. They're slowly lowering the amount the government pays because they can't afford the money as much anymore. Oh, they're great. Their doctors are awesome. We have a slight doctor shortage, however. There is a doctor shortage. And a nursing shortage, a huge nursing shortage. But again, partially it's very cheap and affordable, and I can choose any doctor I want. I mean, it's not like I'm in like Stalinist Russia, and I have to go to this like local like depressing clinic. I can go any doctor's office pretty much in the country. Poindexter, I assume so. I don't know. But essentially, yeah, doctors are a very respected position in Japanese society. Not Fat Rob, statistics. Statistically, he is rare. That's it. And the Japanese ideal of foreign beauty is blonde hair, blue eyes. The majority of Japanese men think Lucy Liu is unattractive. Their concepts of what attractive is differ greatly. Blonde hair, blue eyes. Well, no, it's the image that Hollywood produced in the 1960s and 70s and 80s, like the Farrah Fawcett, that image, for example, the Miss Universe pageant from like you look from like 1950s on, they've been defining like universal beauty as Northern European looking. It's only in the last 10 years that the Miss Universe pageant has now started to go towards mixed looking people, or people who look like they could be some kind of South American or like Middle Eastern, European-ish, like Israeli, Brazilian, like Okinawans are kind of like darker skinned. Like, but actually, if you look, I mean, that's like a kind of a barometer of what the media views as a beauty standard. But it actually changes over the years based on what like the popular image of beauty is. And Japanese people consume media that has these same images in it. So, you know, they grew up seeing Marilyn Monroe, and these people elevated as beautiful icons. So obviously, they think the same thing. You know, it's kind of obvious. Yeah, there's welfare, obviously. Yeah, we have all the benefits of a social state, essentially without being the social nanny state that America seems to fear so much. Japan is in many ways, but we have a actually, Northstock, thank you for that private mail. You're right. Yeah, Haina specifically is her extremely pale skin. She is almost impossibly like pale. She looks like some type of African river frog that never gets out of the jungle, nearly translucent. That's highly respected in Asia in general. Dark skin is not, but that's changed too. I mean, it's year to year, decade to decade. You know, it's different. Like, and I'm going to leave on this thought. I've mentioned it here many times, but it's one of my great original thoughts on Japanese culture over the years. Is picture, if you will, a gyaru, or a yamamba, as they're called. It's a Japanese Shibuya girl. It's kind of popular these days, and their fashion style is super heavy fake tan, like bright, like white lipstick, bright white eyeshadow, blonde dyed hair, and everyone says it's fucking bizarre. They're weird. They are so weird. And if you take a picture of one of them and look at the photo negative, you will have yourself a geisha. It's exactly in reverse, the same thing as a fucking geisha. It's as bizarre, but the one thing has been culturally institutionalized over hundreds of years. So it's like, oh yeah, geisha, that's Japanese culture. That's normal. That's normal to be that super white, you know, skin. To like, but they just paint themselves physically white to look that white, and red lips actually painted on, you know, super black hair to contrast with the white or whatever. But it's all just at different points in time, different things are considered beautiful, and yeah, so that like the geisha image of beautiful has continued over the years because of the white skin, you know, fetish in Japan. But like, you know, I don't think it's any more normal or bizarre than any other fashion, you know. But yeah, and actually, I as I said at the beginning of the show, I have to go to work now-ish. Actually, more like 15 minutes ago-ish. I can eat a Snickers bar on the train. You wonder why I'm so skinny, and this is why. I only have time to eat when I'm on camera. Thank you guys for stopping by. Once again, thank you all for stopping by. I was glad to answer questions and chat with you all. I will be on next week, and again, I'm trying to get guests on the show. It depends on other people's schedules though. Thank you for viewing, and thank you for stopping by, and I will see you all hopefully next week. Again, the banner is wrong at the moment. It should be 11 Eastern Standard Time, 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Friday. Now, because of the crazy time change thing you people do in the West, and we don't do here in Tokyo, my banner is now incorrect. So noon Tokyo is now 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is what, like 8 or 9 California time, every Friday. Unless, of course, I oversleep, in which case I'm not here. Giamata. See you guys.